note on myself, I'm part of the digital consulting team at Project A Ventures. Before that, I was in consulting in Capgemini Invent, head of operations in a startup, and then at Project A Ventures, I was mainly involved as a chief of staff, so as the right hand of several CEOs. And then I'm super happy to also welcome Stefan Röbel on stage. Stefan is COO and co-founder of ARX Robotics, and maybe you've already seen an impressive robot inside or outside the IHK. If not, have a look later. I think it's a super interesting product. ARX Robotics is one of our dual-use ventures of our portfolio and currently in seed stage. And Stefan brings, interestingly enough, 12 years of experience within the German armed forces and has also served in Afghanistan. And after that, he actually went into the operations, managing, leading, and scaling operations going from super big, the likes of Amazon, eBay, Grover, and ASOS, and then going down to super small. I think you joined ARX at like pre-seed, now at seed stage, as co-founder and CEO. And then I'm happy to also have Martin Sondenheimer on stage, Managing Director of the digital venture holding company 1880 Forward, which is a subsidiary of Munich Re, where he builds and invests in startups. He also hires founders and C-level positions. He serves on startup boards and also advises founders and executives, also brings experience from Allianz, from the corporate venture capital world, and also strategy consulting experience from Capgemini Invent, so something we share in common. And then for the ones who just joined and have not heard Fritzi's keynote, Fritzi brings vast experience from BCG, from consulting as an exec in startups and also as an investor in deep tech companies and founder-led companies. So super happy to have all of your perspective on a panel today. And to kick it off, I would like to start the discussion with the topic of talent acquisition and how to build a successful team. And one of Fritzi's key points was actually that purpose is crucial for hiring and inspiring a team, which I would agree with from my experience. So, Stefan, how does it come into play for you with ARX Robotics in a dual-use space? Do you have trouble finding people because of the military aspect? And how do you think about building your right team and attracting the right talent for you?
Obviously, attracting talent is always a difficult one, especially in dual use. There's a lot of negative bias on defense in the past, which obviously changes now step by step. And then this combined with being a very early stage company and all the madness that's related to that, and which is true. That all needs to be navigated. At the same time, if you find those people have a one-of-a-kind mindset. It just takes a long time to find those. And then using the right channels to attract those people is always not easy. And I have to say kudos to Project A and their operations team helping us doing that from a very early stage because they have the reach and they have the audience that attract exactly that type of people that are willing to go into the fire, into an early stage startup and actually go from there. And then we do the education on site. So, okay, it's a dual use company, be aware. There's also a military use case to that. And we are very real about this. The last thing you want to do if you hire a person is the person being unhappy after 3 months leaving or you being unhappy with the person. So being real is always something we do. If you talk to Bojo, our recruiting support from Project A, sometimes she says we are too real, we scare a lot of people off. But that's it's part of the pre-sort process. We try to find the people that really are in for it. So, in a nutshell, it's super difficult, but you have to take your time. Hire slow, fire fast is something we always do. So if you mess it up, we all do it from time to time, unfortunately, you have to, take action quickly. Before it takes, too much toll on the team. But hiring always slow process, good process, and yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, great. I would be interested to also, Martin, maybe learn from you how the topic of purpose come into play in your context when attracting and also retaining the talent.
Yeah, no, happy to. I think Fritzi mentioned it in her speech. I think purpose plays a crucial role, and I would say also vision plays a crucial role, and it's a founder's job to craft and to communicate an inspiring vision and to rally the team around. I have to say so when we talk about, and apologies to X-course a little bit on this one, when we talk about founder mode or manager mode, these are management styles for me, right? And I think these things come in hype cycles, so I'm a firm believer that there is no silver bullet management style to make a successful company, right? I think founder modes have disadvantages, manager modes have disadvantages. Basically what we heard from Paul Graham, he said, manager mode means hire great talent and get out of their way, right? Sounds good on paper, right? I think the downside, what we heard from him and from others is, and what I've also seen is, if you become too detached as a founder from the company, it risks that the venture is going off track. It loses its identity potentially. It certainly will lose its path to the bigger vision. But I also see some risk on the founder mode, right? And I would, by the way, distinguish between founder mode and founder-led companies. The founder mode in an extreme way would mean, well, it has the one risk that it's really dependent on one person potentially only, right? And I'm come from the risk industry, so this is a big risk for me, right? It's all dependent on one person. The second one being, maybe you don't leave enough room for other talents in the company to grow, right? So there's also the risk of this from the mode. When I'm hiring founders or CXOs for the ventures in the portfolio, I try to combine the positive aspects of both, if you will. What are these? Again, repeating the topic, I think it's someone that can craft and communicate a great, inspiring vision and rally the people behind. It's someone who gives very clear direction and focus, but at the same time leaves enough room for other talents to grow and to act. And then third, and I like what Fritzi said in her keynote also, is I think the founder should be someone who owns the product vision and have a deep understanding of the product, because that's, to a large degree, for me, is also the identity of the venture. And one last sentence, I don't think you need to be a founder to be a great founder. So I think you can also be a great founder as an employed CXO, which I also have in my portfolio. It doesn't need to be a founder naturally yourself.
Yeah, great, thank you. And we'll definitely dive into the founder's mode versus the manager's mode in more detail later. One question for the purpose in your direction, Fritzi, because you're also hiring teams, you hire teams. The economy now is turning a bit, right? Are you actually seeing that job security is getting more important than purpose right now?
Yeah, I think this is a good question, and because I think the question is also what really is purpose, and and I think this, oftentimes we think that purpose is, oh, we want to work on for example, the energy transition, or something that really feels like has a very big societal impact. I think that purpose can be broadly defined. Like Stripe, I think, has a purpose of something like we want to grow the global economy, or I don't know the exact details, but they have a very strong purpose definition. And it's in the end, it's a financial fintech platform that has grown to be extremely large, one of the most successful venture-backed companies. And so I think that this whole purpose definition can be pretty broad. What I meant is like it's really important to put that at the forefront, and because if you work, a lot of ambitious people don't want to just work for a company that has purpose at the center, but the company also needs to be successful. Like, you need to be able to grow and be financially successful, and I think that has become a lot more important recently, because obviously, like during the hype years, things got funded much more easily, even when there wasn't a clear path to a return or to an exit. Now things are looking different, or maybe they will turn around a little bit again now that interest rates are lowering. But during sort of these high interest rate years, it was much harder also to get funded if you're a deep tech company with a very sort of long return profile. So I do think it has an impact because you know, you at some point, you know, when you're working for a purposeful company, but the product or like the mission isn't realizing, it takes a long time. It is hard to keep people motivated, and that's why I think any like company that you know has a positive impact. There's obviously other companies that don't have a positive impact, in my opinion, tobacco or like there's also many others. But I think it can be described very broadly, and that's just something to hone in on. And I think also, as Stefan mentioned, different people want to join different missions. And I think that's probably for Stefan, there's probably a narrow target group of people you can recruit from at the moment. I think it's probably growing pretty fast. But it's important to know who are these people that will really, you know, that are fully convinced on this and will go through the highs and lows. And this can vary for different companies.
Yeah, great. Then
can I add one thought on this, if you allow? I don't think it's either job security or purpose, right? I don't think it's that black and white, and I don't think purpose will be less meaningful in the future. But I do think there's one addition to it. So it might not be enough for founders to communicate, you know, a compelling vision to their team anymore in the future, or at the moment. But in addition to that, it might be needed to also show a convincing and compelling case. How does a path look like to a sustainable business model going forward, right? I think these aspects will become more important. So vision plus a path to success, I think, is maybe something you would need to attract talent going forward.
Yeah. And then one topic which is connected to attracting, but also mainly on motivating and retaining talent. And maybe Martin, let's stay with you. How do you look at the topic of variable remuneration, employee stock options, bonus components? How is that important? And in which cases is it working and in which not?
Let me maybe start with a more general answer first, and then we can go down into the woods if you want. Obviously, there's very different mechanisms, intrinsic ones, extrinsic ones, to motivate people. Financial incentives are an intrinsic instrument, and I think they are an important one. I think they're especially important to attract talent to your company, also because you're in competition with others. They can partially also help that people don't run away if they're structured right. But most importantly, I think from an investor's perspective, it's an instrument to make sure the management team or the founders act in a way they intended to act. So for example, for my portfolio, I care about, not surprisingly, that the ventures maximize the enterprise value. So any incentive for the founders, but also for the employed CXOs, it needs to be related to that KPI of maximizing the enterprise value. So it's important, but, and there are two buts. First but is, I think in order to really see people showing extraordinary performance, I don't think financial incentives make that happen, right? You need something else, and we're overstressing the term of purpose and vision maybe, but I think that's, again, a key point here. We heard about team culture being an important one. I think also that great talent need room to operate and freedom to grow and leave their mark on the company. And then something I think Alex said in the very first panel is a sense of ownership and accountability. I think is something important also to motivate people. Second but is, and I've seen it in my cases, financial incentives can also backfire in times where things are not going well and where potentially, the upside potential becomes a dream rather than a possibility. It can also potentially even lead people leaving the company if they're only, let's say, financially oriented. And I think this, talking about corporate ventures now, I think this problem is especially bigger in corporate ventures. And maybe to give you some context, so I have some classical corporate startups that are 100% companies of ours, and we have the more classical real startups where we have started the company, but now they're founder-owned. If things are going not well, I think the employed CXOs, they're easier to run away when they don't see an upside potential anymore, because they don't have this sense of ownership. I think real shares and real participation in the company is not only an extrinsic instrument, but also an intrinsic to some degree, because you feel this sense of ownership, right? This is my company, this is my baby. So I think this is something where I learned, the classical corporate startups cannot compete in this fashion.
Yeah. Stefan, how do you look up on the topic?
I think it's a lot of that. I just Martin made a lot of great points. Let's break it down to a really early stage company. Like the incentivization of employees is a really difficult thing. You always have the structure of virtual stocks and but this needs to be communicated really properly. There's so much more to it than just, all right, this is the amount of shares you have, this is your strike price. If you go up 10x, you're going to make some money. People need to understand what's the liquidation preference, all of that stuff that needs to be understood to understand, all right, I do have something that company gives me, but is it worth? Is it worth the struggle? Is it worth anything? And it's really like a really difficult thing to communicate because it has so many layers and it's so technical. At the same time, bonus is something which incentivizes only short term. In a fast-growing environment, I don't know what the target is. I might like overachieve it by 3-4 times, but maybe I fall short. So people to be incentivized only to hit a certain target is super difficult. So the bonus doesn't make sense for us. So we try to maximize, as you said, enterprise value. So we're driving for that long-term target to get bigger and more successful, no matter what it takes. And then it comes down to purpose. What we figured out is like if we give people ownership and tell them, all right, listen, folks, you're going to own this one. And I cannot promise you we will be successful in 5-10 years, but I'm going to promise you you're going to learn a ton. And you're going to look back on this time and say, all right, this is what we built, and be proud of it. And being proud of the work you do is something which is a really strong incentive for people from an intrinsic point of view. So we try to take that purpose and break it down into ownership, where people actually own stuff and can be proud of it. And then the financial incentives, as you said, might backfire, so that's difficult to navigate. So we give them like a baseline to keep the lights on pretty much, and then the lottery ticket with the VSOP, but the rest is just purpose-driven, fun of work, ownership, accomplishment, so those kind of things.
Yeah, okay. Then let's move over to the topic of the founders mode, which you introduced, Fritzi, and look at possible negative effects, right? Because there could also be pitfalls involved. And maybe staying with you, Stefan, can or is the founders mode an excuse to be a bad manager? And what are possible negative traits? And how is it still possible that those founders hire and retain great talent?
Yeah, okay. Not going to share too much detail about the founder structure of ARX, but we have a very diverse founder structure, right? And I'm part of the manager mode, to be honest. We have Priyanka in the audience who worked with me for quite some time, and she knows that I try to find great talent and actually guide them, mentor them, but more or less get out of the way, right? So I'm leaning more towards that structure and that way of working, and then we have the other team, like Mark, Max, true founders, hands-on, deep into it, always driving. And I feel like the diversity in your leadership team, whether you're an investor, what you're looking for is probably diversity in the leadership team and not only one kind of person, because like, as I said, it's a single point of failure. If you only have one person, you have to deal with that person and hope that he can do it all. And then founder mode, like having that visionary is great, but you need somebody who can drive execution and structure all of that. And you need a great mixture between the Tasmanian devil that goes around and shares the vision, being like a preacher and talking about the future, and then collects all that great ideas, and then a team that actually executes on it, builds structures, makes sense of what comes out of the visionary. So I feel like diversity is king on this.
Is that maybe the seed crystals in the end?
That's it. That's gold nuggets.
Okay, great. Martin, you also touched upon the founders mode and also said something like, yeah, but what's actually founders mode versus managers mode? How does it come into play in your context, the founders mode? And how do you look upon it?
Yeah. So again, a bit more context. So I have employed CXOs and I have, let's say, real founders in the portfolio. And I think I mentioned this in the past. You don't need to be an actual founder to be a great founder, right? And it's not always the case, but we have positive examples where this is the case. And again, the key element for me is the sense of ownership, right? In this one case where we have a team that is employed, but they act like founders, it's their baby. They started the idea, right? They've built an identity and a culture in the team, and you don't see the difference to, I think, a real startup, right? But unfortunately, it's not the regel, right? It's not the rule. Talking a bit about founder mode and manager mode again, I think the risk of the manager mode is you become too much detached, your hands off, you lose the identity, you lose the path to the bigger vision. So I think it's, again, for me, it's combining both positive aspects of both, being able to craft and articulate this great vision, being able to give focus, because that's the biggest risk I see in the manager mode, that everyone wants to build their own kingdom, right? In this sense, so you need to give the focus, but then in the given focus and frame, let the guys do what they need to do. And again, also repeating what Fritzi says is, I think you need to be close to the product, because if you don't understand the daily challenges in the product, it might be hard to continue communicating this vision also.
And actually, that's a very good transition, because that's where I want to dive deeper with you, Fritzi, now. Where's the sweet spot between the founders mode and micromanaging? Because micromanaging can demotivate, right? There's actually no seed crystals. If you're micromanaging, they're not working. So how do I balance this founders mode versus micromanaging, and also especially from going, let's say, pre-seed stage at RX to like a Trade Republic and Sender? To me, it seems like an easy task if you're small and you have to be involved in everything. But how do you get out of it, out of the way of product managers, hiring managers, and finance managers, and you actually keep that speed and you're looking at the detail you actually have to look?
Yeah, I think this is one of the trickiest parts about founder mode, is this prioritization of where to get involved and where not to. And what I think is interesting is that, a lot of founders, actually it's probably maybe, I don't know the statistics, but a lot of founders are quite young, like, start their companies maybe in the late 20s. And they've never really managed a big team before. And so I think part of this micromanagement is also just founders, as the company grows, for the first time leading big teams. And I think this is a normal trait of any kind of first-time manager, is that they get too much involved in the details because it's what they're used to if they've done a good job as an individual contributor. And so I think there's also a natural tension in there of like, especially like first-time founder or less experienced founders, getting kind of involved everywhere, and that doesn't scale, like, of course, and that's why, and you will kind of scare away good talent if you always have the last word, and if you want to be involved and it just doesn't work, like, you won't be successful. So, and I think this is the big, like, this challenge that every, like, sort of good founder needs to get right, but also every good manager, and this is what I mean, is like, the good managers are not the people who just hire good people and then let them do their thing, but they know when they should step in and when they should give more guidance and when they should also be more involved in more detailed discussions to help sort of, solve problems, because that's in the end what you do. And I think this having the sense of when that is the case, like when it's really important, is what really differentiates good managers and good founders from the bad ones. And also, I think one thing that's really important about this topic is that, when you get involved in the details, you start talking to not just your direct reports, but then as the organization grows, like the whole idea is that you kind of can skip the opinion. You don't just talk to your direct report and tell them, hey, this is how I would do it, but you really get involved in the decision making, and you also talk to people across the organization, not just to your direct leadership. And I think what's really important when you do that is to, especially if these are people you want to keep being involved in, who you still trust, your managers, is to communicate well and it's a lot of this is also about how you communicate and how you bring the team on board, so that they don't feel like, oh wow, now like sort of I thought this was my job and now I'm sort of passed over. So I think it's first of all knowing when to get involved, and then also doing it the right way. I think that the Brian Chesky example, when he says like whenever he gets very involved, I think is also when his managers, in my opinion, are probably also failing, or maybe the right managers. And so I think, you know, there's these different moments. One's like where you really think that a manager is not working out and you want to kind of fix it yourself, or like you just you know, want to involve also the lower levels of the company.
Yeah, great. I think there's even more we could explore here today, but unfortunately our time is up. So thanks so much, Stefan, Martin, and Fritzi, for joining me on the panel. Thank you so much.